Can I have a little bit of a runway? Because I have a little bit of frustrating
Should we go to
thoughts.
Gita first?
I mean, I'm gonna once I go, I'm gonna go.
Let him have it.
Go ahead, Arash.
Okay. So
Glasses just came
no,
off.
my glasses came off because I've been thinking about this for a long time. Now, first of all, he apparently, Jeff Gordon and John Davidson had a 12-minute little press interview discussing the incident and the issues with Tony DeAngelo, and it all stemmed from Tony not being able to get over the fact that he was healthy scratched, like he couldn't get over the fact that, hey, maybe your bad play, which leads to bad defense, which leads to penalties, which leads to us like costing us points in the standings.
Not a team player.
Not a team player. This is where I kind of lost the fucking plot today a little bit in my head.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm watching Jeff Gordon and John Davidson, and to summarize essentially what they said about Tony DeAngelo, they just said this. Well, Tony actually helped, K. Miller earlier in the season. Tony was a good teammate. He had a very good season, a season that spoke for itself last year. Yada, yada, yada. But he's never going to play for the team again.
Mm-hmm.
And social media wasn't the reason behind this decision.
No, they said, oh, well, we keep track of all of our players, and he's a little outspoken. Okay.
They used the freedom of speech excuse. Like,
They
he has
did.
freedom of speech.
They did.
Before Arash keeps going, because he's got his runway, I saw a lot of the clips. I saw a lot of the quotes.
Yeah.
Kind of out of hacked up,
Yeah.
and I'm like, this is a guy that really should have rehearsed this and had specific talking points and planned this out well. I remember Brad Treliving when they had to get rid of racist Bill Peters, he came out and he was very concise and spoke very eloquently and matter of fact about it. But then, you see this rambling, well, there's Twitter and there's freedom of speech and this and that. I'm like, what are you talking about? This isn't the issue.
The Rangers haven't looked very good on how they've dealt with him in the last couple of seasons. Like, they've given him a platform, they've promoted him, and they've essentially
They gave him a
okayed.
podcast. They gave him and Brendan Lemieux a fucking podcast about this shit.
They've okayed his behavior. I don't know if it was K. Miller that was it, because there was rumors that it was Kreider that he got into an altercation with, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
There's other anecdotes that came out, K. Miller didn't get the puck after he scored his first goal, but they're like, Tony DeAngelo took it, and then other people are like, no, he took it so that they could frame it for him, and it's like, ooh, this sounds like
There's
all sorts of stuff that's just coming out of the Rangers trying to cover up for their stupidity and giving this guy a job. Like, most people in any other form of employment would lose their jobs. You don't have to explain to anybody why.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the essential, I think the final story on it was that Georgiev essentially punched Tony DeAngelo. K. Miller came out and was the person who stopped it. So beyond I also saw this, a lot of people posting about the idea of there needs to be a path for redemption. There needs to be a second chance. Listen.
He's on his eighth chance.
This kid, for a second, this kid had a second chance in fucking Sarnia for spouting racial slurs to teammates. He was drafted in the first fucking round by Steve Yzerman. Steve Yzerman gave him a second chance to say, hey, you got to change your shit around. I mean, you look at, in the same vein as you look at someone like Ryan Merkley, who got drafted by San Jose, who is one of these headache type players, that comes with a controversial past and everything, but that comes in and says, well, you can play really well. You're an amazing offensive talent, but you got to figure it out if you want to play in the NHL. So he bounces from Tampa to Arizona to New York. He is allowed a leash, just an unparalleled leash. And as long as he can play and he can put up points, they'll put up with it. Now, guys, I just want to take you back to. Do you remember John Tortorella's press conference talking about Anthony DeClaire? And Torts came out and said, I just don't know this kid. I don't know if this kid's going to be a player. I don't know if he's ever going to get it. Yada, 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 yada. What fucking blows my mind, again, is that here is another player that everyone is fully aware of the multitude of issues, the multitude of complete red flags that are given to this person's history. But they're put in a closet in a cupboard because they can quote unquote play. But a person, let's say a person of color like Anthony DeClaire, is publicly lashed and shamed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
for this kind of shit. And I'm sick of it. I'm sick of how we have to keep hiding behind this idea of, oh, well, that doesn't exist. Actually, if you get into the nitty gritty of it, you'll figure it out, blah, blah. They stood there today. Mm-hmm. Jeff Gordon, John Davidson stood there today in a meeting and did not say one negative thing about Tony DeAngelo to say, well, you know what? We don't condone this, this aggressive physical behavior against another one of his teammates. All they said was, well, actually, they literally fucking said this. They came out and they said, actually, Tony DeAngelo and Keandre, they're good friends. Tony helped Keandre at the beginning of the season. But he's never going to play for the team again, and we're going to leave it at that. If this was PK Subban,
mm-hmm.
if this was anyone else, it's happened before where they would just do that. Oh, it just drives me nuts.
Well, what about this? What about some certain New York Islanders prospect
mm-hmm.
sleeping in on the first day of camp, which, you know what, like that doesn't happen. You never give somebody the benefit of the doubt when they sleep in, and you send them back to the OHL on day one. In the moment, at the time, you think, oh, well, he must be a real troublemaker, and that's an attitude adjustment, and that's what Lou Lamoriello is going to do because that's Lou Lamoriello hockey. But then you start to wonder, this is happening a lot.
We get told
There's
that
a
about
trend.
him a lot. He's been labeled a problem from day one, except when people are blatantly a problem.
Yeah.
Dude,
They've
guys,
skirted around the issue, but there are so many other people who have been labeled problems simply for having bigger personalities. It's okay to have a big personality.
It's totally fine to have a big personality. Love it. But I'm so, like, Sean Avery comes out and talks about sloppy seconds and does shit like this, and we're like, ha 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 ha, oh, Sean, it's just a show. And that same player is employed by the Dallas Stars and the Rangers twice. and
well, I would argue that they, in an effort to protect, I don't know if they were trying to protect the trade value of Tony DeAngelo or they were just covering their own asses, but the Dallas Stars responded 10 times as worse to Sean Avery's bullshit comments than John Davidson and Gordon did to Tony DeAngelo being a problematic piece of shit teammate that literally got in a fight, that provoked a fight with his teammates. So it boggles my mind of how the Rangers handled it
That's
today.
the thing. If that information hadn't leaked and it was like something that, if it was an altercation that took place, an alleged altercation that took place like behind closed doors and in the dressing room and never got out, we wouldn't be having this conversation today, and he would have gotten a slap on the wrist, if that, or a finger wagging and told, don't do that again.
He would have said, don't do that again, and then they would have traded him and just saying, well, we had an offer on the table that we couldn't refuse, and you know what, we're sad to see Tony go, but this is a great piece we're bringing in here, and that would be that. And then somebody else would do what 3 other teams had done before. And so because it leaked out, they couldn't do what they probably wanted to do, which is do nothing about it.
Mm-hmm. And to also just point out in the fact that, when we're talking about players like Josh Hosang and Anthony DeClaire, I'm not giving them a complete pass because they are obviously people of color, but just the idea that, like, you look at someone like Keandre Miller, the idea that one of the points or facts is that I feel that athletes of color, especially in the NHL, feel that they have to conform more than the next person or the next teammate they have beside them that is a white teammate. They have to conform to something even more stringently to be given an opportunity. Like, if you were to take two people with the same Tony DeAngelo kind of bullshit, okay, and you put one person who's a person of color and one person who's white, subconsciously, like, you know what's going to happen. One person's going to be labeled, well, they don't get the culture. They're a troublemaker. They're this, they're that. They just don't get it. The other one's like, well, they're outspoken and they have some, freedom of speech. I cannot believe that shit. Where they'll use the freedom of speech to protect Tony DeAngelo. But anyone else that might be like none of the, like, anyone else and any other athlete that is a person of color might be a little out there in terms of their views or how they view the world, or maybe they haven't been given the same opportunity.
How
they dress.
How many times have players been called out for how they dress because their jacket and their hat might be a little, quote, louder?
Exactly.
Not hockey culture.
It's not hockey culture.
And you brought up a good point. Like, they didn't need to bring up anything about his political views.
No.
And, like, Tony's mega number one. Everybody knows that. But these aren't issues. For the most part, his issues are not about who he voted for or the dumb red hat he wears. This is about him being a piece of shit teammate. Yes. And if you're somebody that leans that way and listening to this, like, this is something to do. I don't agree with anything that he says on his deleted Twitter account or what he says on his Parler account or who he voted for. But Jesus Christ, I do care about how good of a teammate you are in a game and in a league that jerks itself off about what good-hearted boys these are and how it's a team game and this and that. But if you are a garbage teammate, then you get held to the fire.
He's not a good person, and that's so evident that there's no way he could ever be a good teammate because he doesn't have any respect for people.
Yeah.
And he's made that abundantly clear.
Yep. And it's just crazy that this keeps happening. Where we can't view something in saying, okay, yeah, this person might have the potential to be like a 40-point defenseman, but maybe we're going to take the high road and find a 30-point defenseman that is a little bit better just for the general morality of the world. Let's
He's a grown man. Like, he doesn't deserve any more chances because he's never going to change.
Let him go to the KHL. Let him just go to the fucking KHL. Yeah. That's good. That'll be his career. And make your goddamn money and enjoy the rest of your life, and you'll be known as being who you are. And I hope you find some form of redemption for yourself.